Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. We want to tell you to subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right there in the description. Got about 1,000 Heat fans on there. It's a place for conversation, information, celebration, and lately consternation. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Link right there in the description, $2.99 per month. And if you click on that link, you will bypass the Apple upcharge. And when you get sick of Eternal on there, you can just cancel it, but then come back. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of 5 on the Floor, 3 yards per carry, 305 guys, and everything else that we have at the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, you can play up to 6 players together across the sports spectrum. So whether it's MLB, NHL, NBA, it's all there. Go to Prize Picks, use the code 5, get $50 to play right away. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne,
Yay, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds,
down to Biscayne.
kept the floor playing, got it all band, y'all seen the block, stop with one hand, and Pat we trust, Inspire have the guts, we're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I'm coming to you today because of fire alarms in my building from Philomena's in Flagler Village. We appreciate them turning the Adele down just a little bit here for a period of time as we get through this episode. We've got a special episode today. We're going through our Miami Heat off-season series because that's all we got right now. We've got Eternal Bast. You can follow him at Eternal Bast. You can also find him at playback.tv/5RSN. We'll be covering the NBA games as we go forward there on the streams. He's also on Off the Floor. We've got DaMichael Cole. DaMichael, give me your Twitter address again.
At DaMichael C. Yep. Just his first name and then the letter C at DaMichael C.
All right. That makes it easy. You can find him at the Memphis Commercial Appeal. And then, oh my God, it's been a while with you out here. You can find him at my Mike Check, my old colleague, compatriot, competitor, when he was down here for the Heat Index, one of the most remarkable media things that's ever occurred, himself, Arnovitz, Haberstroh, Windhorst, covering the Miami Heat, all 4 of them, during the Big 3 era, now up in Memphis at Grind City Media, our guy Mike Wallace. Mike, first you commented, you had to comment here that I was eating when we came on, because it's pretty much all I do. But appreciate you guys joining us today, and we're going to talk about Ja Morant, because we're going to go into all these players who could be potential Miami Heat targets and see if this is actually a possibility in any way and whether or not it makes sense. I'll start with DaMichael here. Do you think the Memphis Grizzlies are intent on keeping Ja Morant through this offseason?
Oh, for sure. If you look to, like, where's the chatter been coming from in terms of Ja Morant trade speculation or whatever you want to call it? It's all external. It hasn't been much talk of that internally, whether it be, the local beat writers here, whether it be the team, whether it be the players or anyone of the sort. So I just don't see it happening. I think there is a realization that the urgency in Memphis is higher than it's been before, but that urgency is leading to them wanting to win more rather than them wanting to kind of move off of what I think is not only the most marketable player that they have here, but I think it's become clear, especially with the way that this season played out, that the team's highest ceiling is when Ja Morant is the best player. You can say Jaren Jackson Jr. was the best player for the Grizzlies this season. I won't argue with you. But I'll also say that at the same time, when you talk about the highest ceiling for the Memphis Grizzlies, which leads to them being where they want to be, it's with Ja Morant kind of manning the keys. So look, I really don't see it happening. And, Zach Kleiman, the Grizzlies general manager, president of basketball operations, he's come out a couple times. The first time, was more adamantly when he basically said, we're not trading Ja Morant. And then if you go to the exit interviews right after the season ended, he kind of reiterated it, in a less of a declarative tone, but just basically saying, we do not plan on moving Ja Morant.
Before I get to Eternal on this and then to Mike, Michael, right now, do you think Ja Morant at his best is a top what player in the league? 10, 15?
I say you could put him top 15. I think in 2022, 2023, I mean, a lot of people had him top 10, but there have been a couple players who've kind of, come onto the scene right now and have passed him up, so to speak. And then, of course, with the injuries and things like that. So I think roughly in that 12 to 15 range is where he comfortably sits when, like you said, when he's at his best. Like from March to the end of the season, that Ja Morant is right in that 12 to 15 range, if you ask me.
All right, Mike, I got one for you, and then, again, going to turn it to Eternal here. You've obviously been around organizations in different stages, right? You were covering the Heat before they built with a big three, and trying to work around one star, basically, in Dwayne, and figure out how to make that happen. And, of course, then it flamed out in the first round of the playoffs 2 straight years. Kind of seems like a position Memphis may be in a little more, although I think they have more overall talent maybe than those Dwayne teams did between 08 and 10. And then you saw a team that had to win then, right? Like Big Three, you come down, they had to win them, and you were there with everybody from ESPN. They had to win then. I mean, there'll never be a team like that again. I think that's under that kind of scrutiny. And then you've also been around teams that have been sort of more in a rebuilding posture. And a couple of years ago, when the Grizzlies were really struggling, where do you think they are right now? Because if Michael's right, I mean, they're pushing, they're not going to trade the best player.
You know what? Thanks again, Ethan, for doing this, man. I mean, your network has grown year over year. I remember when you started it. You know what I mean? I remember going way back almost 20 years ago now, man, when you and I first started working together and down there in Miami. And when I saw the intro video, man, I almost had to go get some tissue, man, because all the memories and all the scenes and sights.
We should have put you in it. That was the problem. We should have. I don't know what we were thinking. I'll have to get with Mercy on that.
Man, we've been hired, fired, and shifted around so many times. It's been funny, man, in so many nightclubs and spots and all that. But anyway, man, I digress on that. You asked about the Grizzlies and where they are.
It was good to
I really think they're at a crossroads right now. No question about it. They're at a crossroads right now because this is the first time, and DaMichael can attest to this. And when you refer to DaMichael and you seek him out on X, the capital C, make sure you put the capital C in there. DaMichael capital C, right? Because that boy is about capital things. He's big time when it comes to what he's doing around here in Memphis. This is a team for the first time is tasting its own blood, is smelling its own poop, right? It's really looking at itself and saying, all right, I'm not as good as I thought I was. You know what I mean? And when you're doing that organizationally from really the top down, you're not as smart as you thought you were. You're not as talented as you think you are. You're not fine in the West. You're not fine in the league. You're not any of those things, right? The only thing you are is paid, and it's only going to get more and more expensive. So at what cost to your organization? When the cost sort of outweighs the production, then you're at a crossroads. You're looking at yourself and you're saying, okay, staying down this road is only going to be far more expensive. We're going to, tickle up against the luxury tax and then potentially the apron territory once we have to pay everybody. And is this the way we want to go? And I think that's where they are now. They realize when you look around, just look at, when this airs, I'm not sure exactly when it airs, but game 1 against Oklahoma City and Denver, Denver goes into Oklahoma City and wins that game. They close out. They have clutch. They trail by double figures, comes back and win. They didn't have a whole lot of rest. They came off a 7-game series. The Grizzlies go into Oklahoma City in game 1 and get beat by 51 points, right? Like they weren't even prepared to be on the same court with those guys. That tells you, and you're only separated by 2 games in the standings from from that team, that Denver team. So that tells you a lot about where you are and what you need to do. I think they're at a crossroads.
Well, that Eternal, that reminds me of the Heat in some ways. The Heat get blown out by Cleveland, 92 points over the final 2 games of that series, and then Indiana goes in there and wins. And I think before the season, Heat brass would have said, we're right there with Indiana. But they weren't. And that's where they're at a pivot point where we are doing all these episodes on whether or not they need to move forward, right? It's a question of evaluating yourself.
I mean, you go back and look at it. I think when you go back and look at it in January, even when all the Jimmy stuff was going on, and there was talks about whether Jimmy would be coming to the Grizzlies, so it just feels like everything is coming full circle right now. I think even then the Heat were thinking of themselves being in a much better position than what they ended up being. I definitely think that they thought they could still be competitive, probably not reach the same ceiling as they could have reached with a motivated Jimmy that we thought they were getting in the season. They didn't get. We're see that he's doing that with the Warriors. But I mean, like Mike said, you get a reality check. You chase your own blood. That was just that's the testament of a seasoned great writer right there in Michael Wallace. Everybody, that was that there. But I think it comes in time in your life as humans, especially in this sport where you're competitive on a day-to-day basis, and you're like the competition doesn't stop in season. Like when the season ends, it's every day. It's from management, it's from the equipment, it's from everything. Like everybody can be better, and I think that Miami found that out very harshly, that they can be better, just like the Grizzlies did. In their first game, and even after blowing a 29-point lead, I was among the ones that thought that they would be fine, even when Ja went out, having such a sizable lead. But as we saw, that was not the case. But I do think they are kind of similar positions for different reasons.
Yeah. It seems like it. It's like in this sense, Jimmy's gone, so the Heat have been forced into a direction. We've been talking about, okay, they're sort of in this middle space and can't figure out whether to try to build around Jimmy, but then they weren't able to add that piece, whether it was Dame or any of the other players that were available at that time. And like him acting like he acted, forced them to do something. And they found a team that was in a win now mode, which Miami really shouldn't be in right now. But Mike, you know how they are. They don't view it that way. They don't tank. They don't go that direction. I guess back to DaMichael on this, as we talk about, obviously Jaren had a tremendous season, but didn't really pop when it mattered in that sense. We talk about Ja's situation. Do you think there's anything this offseason that would compel them to change their minds? Like, is there like a Godfather offer out there that would say, you know what, Ja's great. He moves the needle for us as a player. There's been some stuff that's happened over the past few years. Maybe it's not central right now, but just sort of reshaping this thing. And also, is there anything else on Memphis's roster as they do reshape that you think could some players they may move to try to build around him at this stage?
Yeah, I think that's the more likely possibility, just the movement around a guy like Ja Morant and things like that. But to answer your question about what could shift, here like the approach this offseason, I think it's the looming decision on whether Jaren Jackson Jr. makes All-NBA or not, and how the Grizzlies approach the offseason after that, and kind of what he wants after that too. Like if Jaren makes All-NBA, he then becomes eligible for a Supermax. And if you look at in the history of the small history of the Supermax, only one player has been eligible for the Supermax and gotten less than the Supermax, and that's Rudy Gobert. And even then, it was pennies and dimes below the Supermax. So you're talking about some massive pay cut. So with that being said, the Jaren Jackson Jr. situation is one where I think if he makes All-NBA and he says, "Hey, I want $345 million. I mean, I want 5 years, 345. Let's figure out how we're going to come to this solution." Then from the Grizzlies standpoint, the urgency is even higher. You have to really figure out how you're going to, kind of put this roster together around those guys. So to answer, the question again, I would say that in that situation, Ja Morant isn't the name that I think most likely becomes available. I think you're probably leaning more towards Desmond Bane of those three guys, right? Because I think Jaren is someone that they want to kind of secure. And I don't know if that number is going to be the number, but I think they want to secure Jaren long term. Of course, we just talked about how they feel about Ja Morant, and that leaves Dez as the other guy who, I mean, they love Desmond Bane, and don't get it wrong, but you're talking about, like Mike just said, they're in a situation now where, and I've described it as, this is the first time in my 4 seasons that I've covered this team where I feel like they've won in the offseason, and it's like they don't feel like they can compete for a championship right now. Like, it's presently constructed. In the past, it's like, oh, if Steven Adams didn't get hurt, we would have beat the Lakers, right. Or when you lost to Golden State, it's like, we're on the up and up, we're coming, right? And then
heard all this.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Last season, the injuries happened, and they're like, it's injury riddled season. Like, this is the first season. It's like, man, OKC really, like, we're not close. So I think it's that realization that a lot's got to happen. So when you look around the roster, there are pieces. There's Santi Aldama's restricted free agency. How are they going to handle that? Because they could be priced out of that. As I said, Jaren Jackson Jr.'s looming extension, that could kind of shrink, the flexibility that you have to work around the rest of the roster. You're probably going to have to move off of a couple solid pieces. We know that, John Conchar, for example, has been in trade talks over the last couple years. And I think Luke Kennard is a free agent. That's another player who's going to draw interest from other teams and probably is unlikely to return to Memphis. So there are other pieces out there where if Jaren is eligible, if he makes All NBA, his number becomes significantly higher, and the Grizzlies will have to really kind of restructure some things around Jaren and Ja.
Okay, we're going to go to a break here in a second. I'm going to bring Eternal in. But, Mike, I have more of an NBA question that's based on exactly what DaMichael said, because the Heat are going to be dealing with this now with Tyler Hero, okay? And this is going to set up where I know Eternal's going to want to take this after the break, and we've done episodes on this, okay? But it does seem, all right, like certain teams have to draw the line on going to the max on the maxes. In the current CBA, you can't be paying two really good players the absolute most you can pay them and try to compete with teams that are paying a Giannis that much or a Luka that much. And it does seem like, David Griffin's lost his job since, okay, but it seems like he kind of drew the line with Brandon Ingram. Okay, we're not going to pay you everything, okay, and Ingram ended up getting a lot from Toronto, but not what he wanted. Do you think as a league that some of these teams are going to say, and the Heat are faced with this with Tyler 3 for $150 this year. He said he's not going to make us think about it if he doesn't get it at this point, right? But it'll cost you more next year, which makes it seem like he's expecting to get absolutely every single dollar. Tyler Hero is not an every dollar player. He's not a two-way player. He's a very good player, right? Do you think more teams are going to draw the line on this, or is the player empowerment era to a stage that you can't?
Ethan, I know you got to go to break, so I'm gonna make this one real quick, man. You and I were both in the trenches where Pat Riley and Dwayne Wade were haggling over essentially $3 million, right? $3 million was the difference, was the gap, right, between those guys. And Dwayne said, you know what, I'll just go to Chicago, right? And then Pat Riley was like, okay, then we'll just go ahead and give this money to, who was it at the time? It was some
Tyler Johnson is who you're thinking.
It was
the other Tyler.
And here I was during that same time. I was in the pay the man camp for Hassan Whiteside, right? So just think
Mike, we don't talk about that. That's it. That's like Fight Club.
Just think about the irresponsible money doling out and the decisions that had to be made. And we're talking about Tyler Johnson and Hassan Whiteside. Those two players essentially broke the Heat at that point, in terms of how they had to break up, some legacy guys. And it all worked out. They all came back together. But I'll say this, and we'll rejoin on the other side of the break, is that the league has to fix this. They really do. Tyler Hero is not a max guy. He's not. He hasn't. Your production isn't commensurate with what your salary demands are. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a super max guy. The league needs to figure out, okay, maybe first team is only qualifying for super max. You don't need second team and third team, especially if you're going to put the 65 game qualifiers in there, because a lot of these stars who are already making the max, they're not incentivized to play 65 games. And that means you're bringing in additional guys that will play 65 that aren't necessarily super max quality type players. So that's where the line is. They need to draw the line there. And the other thing, and I'll stop, the league also needs to look at softening the penalties for the luxury tax for teams that are in that finals, in the Western Conference Finals and Eastern Conference Finals. If you build a team that's finals worthy, they shouldn't be penalized for having to keep their team together and trying to keep their team together. Like, those are two things that the league has to do, and then we'll get back to it on the other side.
Well, and what they should do is a team like Phoenix that doesn't even make the playoffs playing that much, they should charge them triple based on what they should do in that case if the owner's going to go that far. All right, we'll get back in a second. I'll let Eternal take the wheel here in a moment. Do want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them in Boca Raton, but they service the entire Tri-County area. Your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop. Reach out to them before you have a problem. Get your home or place of business fixed up. If you do have a leak, they are the people to reach out to. Michael, Robert, and his team, they've got more than 200 5-star reviews on Google. Also, huge Miami Heat fans with Udonis Haslem posters all over the warehouse. So check it out. Preventative maintenance, the leak detection, the damage assessment. Reach out to them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz,
They got the good.
I should just let you do it. All right.
I don't know why you want to just let me do it.
I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I guess pivoting, as we kind of addressed a little bit of the Heat stuff, and it is funny now that we sit here and talk, and you see kind of the parallels. Just it's a little different between the Grizzlies and the Heat, especially Mike, you and I, when we were talking back in training camp, and how you ended up with the Grizzlies and them trying to replicate a little bit what the Heat were doing with their production. It's just so funny, just the parallels that everything is sharing. Now, obviously, I don't think when you talk about Ja, you talk about Bam, they are elite players for very different reasons. I don't think they are in the same stratosphere as far as top, however, in talent, but I do think that they are the guys that you want to keep. You brought up Jaren Jackson, you brought up Tyler Hero, Desmond Bane possibly being maybe someone that could get moved. When you guys going to Mike first and then on to Michael, when you think about what possible moves could the Grizzlies make, do you think Kevin Durant, do you think a Giannis, somebody like that could be possibly in play for them? And how do you see it playing out?
Well, I'll say this, and I know I really don't have to, but I always do, right? Like in my capacity, I have to, say this as a qualifier. Like, I don't speak on behalf of the Grizzlies front office, right? Like, I'm external when it comes to, I don't have a fingerprint that gets me into the front office suite. DaMichael knows this much. Now, I'm around the team as much as any media member can potentially be around the team internally, but they don't share with me. Like, I don't break news on the Grizzlies. I just don't, right? So what I do is I judge their moves. They make their moves, and I provide perspective from an internal perspective from that standpoint. So having said all that, any opinions that I'm sharing is just from mine based on my history of covering the league and being around the NBA. And, to say that, what I will say is this team, if they're going to take the next step, and correct me if I'm not answering your question directly, but if they're going to take the next step, they will have to make some hard decisions as it relates to one of the big one. I'm not going to call them the big three, one of the core three. They really will. And, but here's the thing. What the Grizzlies have done a remarkable job of is when they get to this point, these crossroad points, they always do right by the player that they have, right? Marc Gasol got dealt to an NBA title contending Toronto Raptors team. And that was a hard decision, but they did right by him and sent him there. Mike Conley at the time went to a playoff caliber Utah Jazz team. They did right by him. Mind you, this was the same summer, like the contract that Mike Conley was on when he got traded was essentially what the Supermax was before the Supermax existed. Mike Conley got an extension from the Grizzlies that made him, for one summer, the highest paid player in the league at 5 years, $153 million. Everybody in around the league was like, Mike Conley's shouldn't be the highest paid player. but that's what the market dictated. The Grizzlies didn't hesitate to offer him that. He signed it, and then they ended up trading him somewhere else. So and I'm only saying this because Desmond Bane's name seems to be the one who's not odd man out, but most likely if they do reach that situation. The Grizzlies didn't hesitate to pay Bane as much as they could pay him, right? He got every single cent that he could get. Jaren didn't get that when it was time for his first extension. Ja didn't get the Supermax because he didn't qualify for it. Ja gave himself his own discount with the suspensions and all of those kind of things. So Bane was done right by. And if they have to move on from him, they would definitely put him in a situation where they would put him in because they care so much about him. And DaMichael's right. Like, would probably be their favorite of the front office in terms of how he's carried himself and how they conduct themselves. So
For sure.
if that's the case, that's how they could be. And I'll turn it over from there.
Well, and to your point, though, again, that we get to the parallels here is that, like, if you look at Tyler's situation, they love Tyler individually. Pat called Tyler fragile, and he responded by playing 75 plus games. And they've resisted trading him over time, and they could do the same thing. They could pay him and try to move him. But the problem is, I don't know that the market would be there for him at that price. So it makes it kind of difficult to move him in the future, and you kind of hamstring yourself. And I know we're short on time here, but I want to sort of get to this piece of it with Michael before we go. Mike Wallace has put this into perspective about kind of where they are. You look at a team like OKC, okay? Not only are they loaded, they may not win this series. I think they caught the wrong matchup because they're playing against a team with championship experience, even if they have a new coach, okay? But you look at what they already have, and then the stockpile of picks that they have, where they can basically any star they want, as long as the star is willing to go there, they can outbid anybody. And one of the things we're talking about with the Heat here is maybe this is just the time to just not just like realize you're not good enough, but just completely reset, because you're entering an era where there are certain teams that stockpiled so many picks, you can't compete with them for the stars unless somebody says just your city. Okay. And then even then with Miami, that hasn't been enough lately. And so if that's the case, doesn't it make sense maybe for a team like Memphis or even a team like Miami and Miami's market to say, you know what, this ain't the era for us. We're going to go back and the Heat won't do it. They say they suck at tanking. They refuse to do it. But doesn't it make sense for a lot of other teams to just do that and just say, listen, we're not going to compete with OKC anytime soon. They want to get Giannis. They trade Jalen Williams and some picks. They'll get Giannis. Okay, may not even need to trade Jalen Williams. I mean, isn't there some credibility to that?
I think so to a degree, but here's the difference. Like we talked about a lot of the parallels between Memphis and Miami. There's one huge difference that I figured out in my 4 or 5 seasons covering the league, and Mike can sort of attest to it probably too in a different way, is that the attractability of Miami as a free agent destination, as a player destination, is a different level than Memphis. And when I talk to people around the league just about the idea of players coming to Memphis and things like that, you realize that, I mean, you just be honest, like how the Grizzlies could acquire a lot of star talent is just going to be either through the draft or it's going to be through trades. And basically when you trade for a guy, you're convincing him that, hey, it's going to be cool to play here, because Andre Iguodala didn't want to play here. Allen Iverson didn't want to play here. So it's a little bit different situation. Whereas Miami, I hear you guys talk about Pat Riley, not finalizing the deals a lot of times, but there's been, whether it's been Dame, Bradley Beal, and whatever, quote unquote star player in recent years, Miami tends to come up in those conversations much more. So with that being said, on the Grizzlies side, I think they're more likely to, hey, look, we can't just throw Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, and Jaren Jackson Jr. off to the Riverside, because it's not just like, oh, well, guess what? Kevin Durant's going to be a free agent next year, and he's going to be interested in us. Whereas, that's more likely to happen in the case of Miami. Now, if they pull the trigger, it's a whole different thing. But it's more likely that the players will say, because you look around the league, L.A., New York, and the cities, the prime markets that players are more likely to automatically be interested in. Memphis hasn't been one of those destinations, not just recently. Like, this isn't anything towards the players. It's just over the course of NBA history and the 20, 25 seasons that they've been in the league. So with that being said, that's why I think it's going to be more likely that, hey, we're not letting Ja Morant go, because who knows when we'll get the next one.
That's fair. Let's close here. I'm just going to throw this one around to all three of you, because the place that Jimmy Butler might have gone, if not Golden State, was Memphis. When I talked to Heat officials, I got the sense during that time that things were further down the road with Memphis. Then, of course, it came out that Jimmy wouldn't go to Memphis, sort of speaking to what DaMichael's talking about, even though I actually thought, other than Golden State, that was his best chance to win this year in terms of the roster that was already set up. And then everything kind of died at that point. But I know Memphis was the one, okay, that they were talking to. What the exact parameters would have been, expirings, other things along those lines. There was a lot of different reports about that. So I'll just go around the room now that we see Jimmy's in the second round in Golden State, clearly playing a second fiddle role to Steph, which was something that couldn't happen necessarily. There was a Heat fan who came out and said, see, Pat failed Jimmy. He never got him as Steph Curry. I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, neither has any other team in the history of basketball. But I'll just go to you guys on it and all around the room. If they had gotten Jimmy without giving up one of their core three, is Memphis in the second round? I guess I'll start with DaMichael this time, and then close with Michael and Eternal.
Oh, I think definitely. You look at the problems that the Grizzlies had in the second half of the season. It is the defensive drop off is mostly because of the wing and perimeter defense. I think he helps in those areas. They had, basically playmaking problems when teams were able to load up on Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and those guys kind of turned the ball over a little bit. So getting another guy who's comfortable being, a secondary playmaker, facilitator, to the level of Jimmy Butler, I mean, that would have helped them a ton. I think definitely. Now the West is just, it's very good. I mean, you look at a team like the Clippers. The Clippers look like a championship contender most of this season, but at the same time, they just lost in the first round just because they ran into a two-time MVP. So look, I do think the roster makeup would have been that of a team that could have potentially even went to the Western Conference Finals.
I'll just correct you on that. They lost because James Harden is not Dwayne Wade. Michael, you go, and then I'll let Eternal close.
Top three shooting guard.
Yeah. All right, so I'll just do it by the numbers here. Okay, so when the Warriors got Jimmy Butler, their final 30 games, they went 23-7, right? At the time when the Grizzlies would have traded and gotten Jimmy Butler, they were already 39-18, somewhere around there. So you do the math, you're talking about a 56, 57, 58 win team, right? They would have been a clear number two in the West had they gotten Jimmy Butler without having to give up any of the core three. I don't think that's any question. They would have been two. And I think they would have fought back, and they would have been right there with Houston, or even a step ahead of Houston with a Jimmy Butler, just for everything that he can neutralize. So I will say that. And I'll also add this real quick before I pass it on is that the thing about, we talk about the comparisons between Miami and Memphis, and there are a lot more, as this conversation showed. And the one thing I think Pat Riley is having to understand now is that his success and ability to attract these free agents for so long was always tied to the relationship that his top players had with other guys. We're in an era now where those relationships aren't the same anymore. He can't just call Dwayne and say, hey, facilitate a conversation with Chris Bosh and LeBron James. He can't rely on those relationships. And the one thing that makes these things similar is that I don't know how many guys around the league, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, are tight with to say, hey, why don't you come to Miami? I definitely know that's not how Ja Morant operates. He's not a guy that's going to be buddy-buddy with a whole lot of guys among his peers, because he wasn't in their circle when he got to stardom. He went to Murray State. He was lowly recruited. He didn't grow up on the AAU circuit. Whereas Jaren is a guy that knows everybody in the league, right? So when you need someone to help you facilitate those kind of free agent interests, that's where you go with that. So this is a different era. And you're right, Ethan. Maybe this isn't the era for Pat Riley, who can come in over the top and just will his way into getting free agents anymore. They have to do it a different way.
And that's why a lot of people want Spo to be the face at this point, because there's a little bit more of those relationships from USA Basketball, that kind of thing. I do think Bam has those relationships. It just hasn't converted yet. Basically, he had the relationship with Mitchell, he had the relationship with Dame, and it just, they haven't had the assets and the resources. Tyler, I don't believe does, though. I think it's pretty similar to Ja in that regard. All right, Eternal, since you were here, you were going through the whole Jimmy thing, I'll let you close. Let's say they trade Jimmy for, there were all kinds of deals out there, the expirings, Kennard, picks, the whole thing. Okay, you're in Memphis. What do you think Jimmy would have done for them right now? They're in the second round?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think, obviously, I'm not around the team as much as these two guys are, but just, being around the Heat and the things that Jimmy provided for them when things were great, when he provided for them in the locker room and on the court. I do think Jimmy would have helped a lot, being those high tension situations, going into Boston in 2022, going on the road is win or go home in those situations. I don't think Jimmy can do that anymore, but I do think that experience teaching, I believe he could have shared with Ja, with Dez, with Jaren, and just keeping them on a rope and keeping them committed to the moment and not losing it, especially dropping like a 29-point lead. I don't think that would have happened with Jimmy. You know what I'm saying? So, but I do think they would have been in the second round. And I do agree with Mike and DaMichael. I think they would have been at the top of the conference. I don't think they would have been able to catch OKC just because of the room that they created. But I do think Jimmy probably, would have been able to help them get to the Western Conference Finals, if not the finals.
He would have scared the hell out of the front office and the public relations.
Yeah.
Jimmy in the court and Jimmy off the court behind the scenes is two completely
different. Oh my God. People do not understand it. And their honeymoon phase in Golden State right now. And I'll just say this. And everybody loves Ray Ritter, and that Golden State group is one of the best in all of sports. Okay. They win those awards a lot. And so it's all flowery now, but like you're hearing the exact same things he said in Miami. They let me be me, Philadelphia, Minnesota. You heard all this stuff. At some point it will flame out, but if they're giving Steph a chance now, that's all that was about. That was the deal for them. And we'll see where it goes. All right. We really appreciate DaMichael joining us. Our guy, Mike Wallace, joining us. Of course, Eternal, you can find him. Kept these guys a little bit longer, but really good conversation. We hope to catch up with you guys a little bit. Well, maybe I'll make that trip to Memphis next year, we'll ask for 2 credentials for me and Eternal. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thanks again to Philomena's for letting me talk basketball here in their fine coffee shop in Flagler Village on Federal Highway. Mike, you know this area a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one.
All right.
All right. Take care, guys.